Hey everyone, John P. here. Today I'm going to be sharing with you new information, a new story that has come out there in the watch collecting world and the auction house world that puts Omega, the company, the watch producer that we know for the Seamaster, the Speedmaster, and countless others, right in the center of massive fraud. That's right, massive fraud. Omega is part of it. Now, I also do want to say, because of all the crybabies out there on the internet today, I'm really just covering this as a story. All of this info, for the most part, is alleged. There'll be links in the description below where you can go to the news stories and come to the conclusion yourself. But I'm also going to be chiming in with some conjecture, and also just based on my experience in the watch industry, having companies like Del Rey Watch, where we buy, sell, trade watches, and being involved in other ways throughout the years. I'm going to be introducing kind of some perspective that I believe is very telling to what actually happened here with this massive fraud coming from Omega watches. And at the end of this video, I'm going to be sharing with you just some basic things that you can do to stay diligent and try to avoid situations like this in your watch collecting journey. And if you watch this channel, you know that I do actually really enjoy Omega watches. I have a bunch of them, and on the wrist today I have a two-tone Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra 36.5 millimeters, I believe, or maybe 36 OG original Aqua Terra. Really cool watch. So I do like Omega for a long time. This is in no way any kind of Omega hit piece. So what happened here? Let's start with the facts. In 2021, Phillips Auction House, a very notable, well-known and renowned auction house that offers a lot of watches for sale, offered and sold what was supposed to be a very rare chocolate dial broad arrow Omega Speedmaster watch. And this watch was very rare. Omega only produced this watch for a handful of years, and it was the first watch to actually have a chronograph watch to have the tachometer scale on the bezel as opposed to the interior of the watch or on the dial. And this watch sold for a record sum of just north of 3.1 Swiss francs, and it was estimated to only sell for probably about 80,000 to 120,000 Swiss francs. So this is amazing, right? Very high ticket watch. Few watches make it to this level, including Omega, right? Omega has always trailed behind in terms of desirability, but this was such a rare find and special watch. And it is important to note that Phillips apparently, according to the stories here, did do their due diligence. They reached out to Omega. Omega did respond with authenticity confirmation, right? Let's keep in mind that for brands at auctions, big ticket auctions, they do want the watch to sell for a very high amount, because it gives a lot of notability, notoriety, credibility, and honestly free PR for the brand. So when this, when these several $1 million Rolex watches sell, Rolex is like, hey, this is great. This adds so much cachet to the brand. It's awesome. So Omega, they were looking forward to this just so long as the watch was real, and they did say that it was, according to the story. Now, from there, the watch does sell at auction, but something interesting to keep in mind is Omega was the winning bidder. They bought the watch, and Omega was willing to pay this type of dollar amount to put the watch in their museum. Many brands have started doing this over the last handful of years. They've been building out their heritage collection of their watches, and they want to be able to put pictures of the watches in their museum so that they can say, hey, look, this is where we started, now we're here. That's what they're doing, right? Breitling does it, Omega does it, Patek does it. Brands are doing this. It's normal course of action. They want that watch to be in their museum. They want to be able to use the pictures. And so where do we go from here, right? Things that kind of settled down in the dust, and people didn't think too much of it. Many watches are selling for this price point out there in the auction world. The watch market exploded, but then we have a blogger, apparently by the name of Jose Perestroika, and he runs this Periscope blog online, and it was suspected that this watch was a Frankenstein or a fake. Now, brands traditionally would call Frankenstein watches fakes, but Frankenstein is essentially when pieces are sourced from other places, put together in a watch, or maybe they take a watch that's missing a bezel and they find the bezel, things like that. In some rare cases, parts are even manufactured and put together. This is very frowned down upon on the industry. This happens out there, so you do have to be careful when especially buying vintage watches. But this is something people know about. Go to eBay, you'll see a flood of them that are out there. Dial swaps, for example, are considered Frankenstein. Kind of like the story, the movie Frankenstein, right? The piecing together of something to get something different. And so that's what takes us into this essential fraud claim, right? You have this collector community online that sees it and starts seeing, well, maybe there's something here. And then a Swiss newspaper looked into it, and it kind of put Omega as a company in the position of they have to make a statement on this, and also they have the watch. They paid over 3 million Swiss francs for this watch, so they looked into it, right? There's going to be people in the company that are maybe detached from the actual handling of the watches. Maybe they're more of the check writers, the CPA, the accountants, all of those professional people that don't really focus on the watches, don't know enough about it. Hey, let's look into this. Did we maybe do this? And so what we have now is statements from Omega out there in the news saying they do believe it's fraud. They are pointing the finger at a previous employee. They're not saying who it is, but they think that there was probably someone with the consignor who gave the watch to the auction house, right? The watches go to the auction house on consignment. The auction house sells the watch on behalf, keeps a piece of it, gives the money that they owe to the person that consigned it to them, less their fees. Sometimes 20%, just depending. It's negotiable for certain pieces, depending on how hot the watch is, do they want it? And then, it follows on from there. And so Omega's looking into this. This is very new information, but Omega's pointing the finger. Philips is not telling anyone who the consignor was or where the watch came from. They have a policy of secrecy where, they're protecting the consignor. I imagine for so many reasons. It doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, I'll say, lead to them necessarily knowing of any wrongdoing, but Omega looks to be certainly making the claim that, there was some kind of widespread or very large ticket fraud here that happened. Maybe someone, I'm conjecturing at this point, I'm guessing, but maybe there was someone at the auction house that knew someone that worked at Omega and they found the parts. Maybe they were friends, right? In the watch community, oftentimes people know each other and like minds flock together, right? So the old adage says. And so what I think happened here, if I just had to guess, is probably something along those lines, right? You probably had someone working in the Omega office that was very enticed by potentially a big kickback on this big ticket item. And maybe there was someone working at the Philips auction house, and they might not have been anyone in any kind of power or authority, but the people above them may just take their word on it. Hey, these are watch experts. They know what they're doing. And maybe, just maybe, they really did, unfortunately, cross over that line and put together the pieces. And they may have thought of it of, hey, everyone wins at the end of the day. The auction house wins, the consignor wins, Omega wins, Omega gets to put it in the museum, Omega has the marketing budgets, they spend way more than 3 million Swiss francs per year on marketing, and so they may have viewed it in that way. And so only time will tell if and when and if the truth does come out here, whether there's any kind of litigation or legal battles, but I think it could be difficult considering we're looking at many different jurisdictions. This is international, and it could get very complicated, right? And it's something that comes to mind is when talking about these big ticket watches, when a brand says it's good, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good because it does come down to the person working at the brand. So it's the best truth that you can really use without doing the research yourself. But that's what's so cool and interesting about having all of us here in the watch community. We're all passionate enthusiasts, and people like this with the blogs do their own research and they talk with others. And so that's so cool for me to see. And so I do want to say, let's watch this. Let's see what happens. I think it's interesting and curious, but I think it does put a lot of the, kind of the authority back into the collector's hands. Collectively as a whole, the information and knowledge can be shared to come to the truth and not necessarily, take someone's word for it in a back office somewhere that maybe it's just a job for them. So once again, look at the news stories in the description below, come to your own conclusion. But I think based on what I said, that might have been what happened, but take it with a grain of salt. I can't say definitively full disclaimer. But what can you do, right? I think it's First of all, you should trust the dealer that you're working with. At auction houses, you have to keep in mind, auction houses are very reputable. They have great people on the staff, but there does tend to be higher turnover, right? Auction houses don't just do watches. They do many things, and oftentimes that comes with varying degrees of understanding of the watch market, not necessarily the expertise, because you can buy that. You can hire people that have the expertise. But generally what I've seen is the people with the expertise go to the auction house, they make their name, and then they move on and they do their own thing because they can. And the auction houses are notorious for, unfortunately, being that way. They don't necessarily have the highest salaries for people working there because it is a bit of an industry that is driven by prestige and notability, notoriety, more so than the high earnings potential that you could find out there hanging a shingle up for yourself on your own. So that's the first thing. Now, also, don't be afraid to do your own research. I mean, we're talking about an extreme example here, but if you're looking out there, you want to buy a watch or a vintage watch, there's plenty of resources out there, the forums, the blogs, the pictures. Look at other pictures of watches that have sold. I think when you're looking for a watch that's not going to be a one-off like this at this type of dollar amount, there's more than ample information. There's books you can purchase, right? There's the Mondani books, and there's so many blogs out there. And there's friends. Don't be afraid to ask fellow collectors. Ask us at delraywatch.com. We try to do the best there. And also feel free to submit questions on certain watches. We have a form on our website where you can submit questions that get introduced into future videos. And so using your resources and also placing trust in who you're doing business with goes so much further than buying watches anonymously where you don't know where the watch came from. And you really just have to, trust that the universe has your back on that one. So guys, this has been just something interesting that I found that I want to share. I think it's interesting. Let's see how this develops. But certainly I think this goes to show that trust goes a long way in the watch world and the world in general. And that's a big part of how we choose and should choose to work with in the future. Thanks guys. We'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P.